21 years old. I am currently studying politics, science and international relations at the university. My father is from Trabzon-sur-Maneli, my mother is from Erzurum, we are dadas. I was born in Erzurum, but I grew up in Istanbul, I grew up in Fatih. Since I was little, I remember I used to participate in some marches with my mother in Fatih. There would be marches for Jerusalem, for Palestine at the Fatih Mosque. I grew up going there. I studied the Quran. I went to the Quran course. I grew up in a nice family. I went to high school at the Science High School. I wanted to study medicine. I wanted to be a doctor since I was little. I had taken the exam that way. I wanted to study accordingly. On the morning of July 15th, I went to school with my friend to make my high school choices, but the systems were down. I couldn't make my choices. They sent us back from there. In the evening, we went to my grandparents' house. We had guests from different cities, and we all chatted together until late, until 12 o'clock. We ate, drank tea. The television was off, of course. We all had our cell phones aside. Then we came to our own house. After we came home and stopped for a while, suddenly we started getting notifications on our phones. People started calling, turn on the TV, look at the news. They said there are soldiers on the bridge, there is a coup. I was 14 years old then.
We need to shoot, we're shooting,
Turkish.
Shut it down.
I didn't know what a coup was, I didn't know how it was done, why it was done. It just seemed very illogical. Even in my ignorance, I could more or less imagine that a coup could take us back years and years, and it was really illogical. Why are the soldiers on the bridge? Why are they not letting people pass? None of us could make sense of it at first. Then I wanted to get out immediately. Maybe when I was growing up. Since we always attend such rallies and marches, I wanted to see what was going on in the street. But my parents said we should wait a little bit. They said that at least Mr. President should make a statement and we should go out accordingly. At that time, we watched the reading of the declaration on TRT. We were communicating with our relatives and friends. My friend was on Veytan Street where the Provincial Security Directorate is. He told me that the sounds of clashes started to come from there.
The armed forces seized power based on the principle of peace at home and peace in the world.
I was at home close to that danger, but I was worried about him and I asked for his forgiveness. Just in case, take care of yourself, forgive him. Then, thank God, our president came out and invited the people to the squares. At that time, my sister and I were already getting ready to go out. We did our ablutions, took our flags in our hands, and the family, my mom, my dad, my sister, and me. We went out. We didn't know what we were going to face when we went out, but at the same time, we were prepared for everything. In fact, just before we went out, while we were getting ready, I asked my mother, "Mom, if something happens there now, we hear that people are being shot. Will we be martyrs if we die?" She said, "We are going there for our homeland." She said that love for homeland comes from faith. He said that with Allah's permission, if we die, we will be martyrs, and if we stay, we will be veterans. Just like our ancestor Yavuz Sultan Selim Khan said, if we die, heaven is ours. If we stay, our homeland is ours. That's how we took to the streets. When we first went out, we didn't know where to go. We didn't know where we were needed. We didn't know what the situation was. But that night, I think everyone was being guided by a divine power to where they needed to be. Because no power could have directed millions of people exactly to those points in such a short time. So we first started walking to the governorship. Then we found ourselves in Sarıçayın Park in front of the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. On the way there were salas and even call to prayer. So people were out in droves walking. There were only a few people shouting at people not to go, but nobody cared about them anyway. I even remember a young man shouting that they are shooting Abdülhamit, they are bringing down Abdülhamit. We were When we arrived in front of the Metropolitan Municipality, people had gathered there because those traitors dressed as soldiers had set up a roadblock in front of the municipality. There were 15 or 20 of them, if I remember correctly. They were lined up in front of 2 military trucks. They were waiting on the ground with power rifles in their hands, ready to shoot people, as I later learned. I could see them for a brief moment. They were far away. There were 100 or 150 of us, and no one had a weapon in their hands. Nobody was swearing at them, insulting them. We still had the intention to talk to them, to understand their problems, to tell them our problems, because we all thought that the other person was a soldier, our soldier, because the soldier is always sacred for us. For men, when they are born, they say that a Mehmetçik was born. In the same way, my brother, father, and grandfather were soldiers. We grew up with their memories. We all wanted to talk to them and understand their problems. I wanted to talk a lot. I wanted to say, "What are you doing? Why are you here?" But I didn't have the chance to talk because I was shot that night too. When we went there, they had set up a barricade. They were not letting people pass, and the people wanted to reach them. But as I said, it was with completely normal feelings and emotions, not to talk to them, not even to harm them. Because we didn't yet understand who they were and what their real purpose was. Then they slowly started shooting people in the feet, the ones at the front. Nobody had a gun in their hands. No one was shooting at them from the other side. Maybe people just wanted to walk, trying to cross that invisible border. But they started by shooting the people in front of them in the feet. The people who were shot were slowly taken to the hospital nearby. And that's when we started to realize that this was something different. But no one was scared. Nobody retreated even after that moment. We started to go to them more this time. We were saying soldiers to the barracks. We were saying the takbir. I had our flags in my hand. And the flag with the moon star is mine. I wore the flag with the moon star on my head. My sister had one on her back. With this flag in our hands, we thought that if it was our soldier, he couldn't shoot us, if it was really our soldier. But then, as our numbers increased and the crowd there was not afraid of them and kept going towards them, they realized that they could not scare us that way. And they started to scan us completely. I found out later that there was a colonel with them, and he gave the order to fire. From then on, they fired to kill people completely. That's when they realized. We realized how cruel they were and that they couldn't be our soldiers. That night a power enveloped my body too. It was something I couldn't define, only it didn't scare us. We wanted to keep going at them. And then a rifleman fell next to me. He had been shot in the foot. My father pulled us to the ground. Then I heard a scream. A man had been shot. I think he was shot in the leg. I reflexively stood up to help him. Then I felt a pain in my back. I didn't think that I might have been shot, because I didn't have such things in my life. I was a 14-year-old girl, living on my own. The most I could think of was a rubber bullet, but then blood started coming out of my mouth and nose. I realized it was something more serious. I thought I had been shot in the back because I felt pain in my back, but it turned out I had been shot with a power bullet. And the power bullet, I had to find out later, does the real damage on the way out. It went through my left arm. It shattered the tip of my shoulder blade. It damaged both of my lungs. That's why I have blood. And then I cut a hole in my back 15 centimeters wide. It came out of my back. That's why I felt the pain in my back. Then of course I fell to the ground, but I never fainted. I was always awake. My family was with me. They were with me. In fact, the bullets were still coming at that time, but I was the only one to be a veteran. They tried to take me to the nearby hospital. My father embraced me. But when we got there, they said, completely full of wounded people. Even on the floor, there were wounded people on stretchers. There was blood everywhere. They put me on a waiting chair. Then they said they couldn't intervene because my wound was very serious and there were too many wounded. They had probably discarded me because I was going to die anyway. They only opened an intravenous line. They told me I had to go to another hospital. Then a citizen took us in his car. In fact, one of the biggest emotions, one of the biggest differences that night, one of the things that made me wonder if it was like this, was cooperation. Even if people don't know each other, even if they normally see each other walking on the street, helping people he might have looked at with judgmental eyes. He took us in a family car. He filled it with all of us, my sister, my mom, my dad, and we set off for another nearby hospital, the one on Veytan Street. By that time, I had started to lose a lot of blood. I was slowly passing out, but I remember the person driving that car shouting to open the road because there was a child in the car and he had been shot because they had blocked all the roads. I mean, they were so cruel, they were really so treacherous that they were mercilessly shooting people, crushing them with tanks, dropping bombs with helicopters. At the same time, they were neither letting the ambulance come there nor letting people go to the hospital. They had blocked all the roads because where we were going was the street where the police station was. Then we somehow made it to the hospital. In fact, it was one of the miracles of that night for us. By God's miracle, first they stitched my back. Then they took me to the intensive care unit. At least because I was very young, I thought the wound would heal on its own. They said it would be better if we waited. Then I was in intensive care for a week. I was discharged after staying in a normal room against the risk of infection. My treatment continued at home. My mother actually became a bit of an expert with different dressing materials for months, and my treatment continued thanks to me. Even when I started high school, I still had a dressing on my back. My treatment was still going on. In the following years, I had 2 surgeries, 1 year apart. I had a little trouble breathing because there was damage to my lungs. I had more or less trouble lifting my arm, but thank God 7 years have passed. There is no permanent damage now. I only have a pain in my back. There is a scar in the shape of a pillar, but I always say that I carry that scar as a seal. I carry it as a medal that I am proud of. I see it as a medal that I can show when I go to the afterlife, saying, Rasulallah, I got this wound while defending my homeland. That is already one of my medals. Another medal is this medal given to me by our president, which I wear proudly on my chest. There are still those who call that night a fiction. There are those who say it was a theater. There are many relatives of martyrs around me, and I think that was what hurt me the most after that night. If I had been wounded in a different way, maybe I wouldn't have been able to speak so clearly. But I'm talking about a 15-centimeter hole. In fact, I was recently subjected to a lot of criticism and even insults because people didn't believe it. He was shot with force. How did he not die? How is he alive with a hole of 15 centimeters? Unfortunately, we sometimes encounter such cruel comments. I still remember that night with everything that happened, how his head started to go dark. I remember very well how the end was bright with our faith, with our struggle. Everything that happened that night was real. Our only wish now is that that night will never happen again. Yes, they failed, but it still took a lot from us. And from now on, if they try again, we should not even give them the opportunity to try. I actually wanted to be a martyr that night, but I was not granted martyrdom. I was granted veteran status. So I thought this must mean something. I thought I have a duty now. For years I've always talked about July 15th. I've been to different cities. I talked to people, I told them what I had experienced on July 15th, and I realized that people who had not lived that night, especially in cities like Istanbul and Ankara, were not really aware of what was going on. As I talked to those people, I saw the looks they gave me, sometimes sadness, sometimes pride. I was only motivated by these. I always found strength in those people's understanding of that night, and I talked about that night. Because Ali İzzet Begovs has a saying that if it is forgotten, it will be repeated. I have always tried to talk about it so that it would not be repeated. Those who call that night a fiction, those who call it a theater, are also talking about giving back their rights to the traitors who caused us this pain. But I believe that we will give them and those traitors their rights. Inshallah, we will not give them the opportunity. I am 21 years old now, as a 21-year-old young man. As one of the young people who had given up hope with my peers until that night and said that nothing would happen from now on. I believe that we will be a new generation that will not give them a chance. That night we took to the streets at the invitation of our president, whom we regard as our commander-in-chief. Afterwards, we had the chance to meet and get acquainted with him. I met Mr. President at the first rally at the New Gate. The first moment I went to him there, I was actually just out of the hospital, my arm in a sling. I had an A-star flag on my head again when they introduced me. I remember he was very surprised. He had a face like, "What do you mean they murderer you too?" I felt very sad. I even wished we hadn't come. And he took me in, he chatted with me. I don't remember much about what we talked about because I was excited, but he asked my family about me. He asked about my family, my father. Later, when I had surgery, he called me again. He asked me how the surgery went, which hospital I went to, and whether we needed anything. We went out that night only for our homeland. We went out so that our homeland would not be lost. The homeland is sacred to us, even though there are different opinions now. We grew up reading and listening to how this homeland was taken and how it cannot be given to others. These were always included in our mother's lullabies, in what we learned at school and in all our epics. We grew up with these things, and now we could not give our moon star, our flag, which has taken its color from the blood of our martyrs, to such traitors. We took to the streets for this. I don't believe they will dare to do it again, but I hope we won't give them the opportunity. If it happened again, I would take to the streets again, this time to become a martyr.